today's show, Frank W. Butterfield will join us to discuss a couple of his new novels, actually, followed by our review of Stranger Things, and then Baz and I will share what's held our attention this week. So if you like what we're doing, support us on Patreon, go to YouTube, follow us, please help us get to that magic number where we can have a real URL. Hit our merch store, do something, keep us on the air because we're here for you. Now, on to our guest. Frank W. Butterfield is the Amazon best-selling author of the Nick Williams Mysteries and dozens of other stories all set in the same universe. He's the Sagittarius who enjoys the beach, watching old movies, and listening to the Bossa Nova. Frank, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you back, and it's good to see you in person. So, for the folks who haven't seen your previous interviews, just give us a quick how you got started as an author, because I love your story.
Well, I started in 2016 after having written about 300,000 words of kind of fanfic, and suddenly realized, oh, I know how to write a story, but my fanfic was not publishable. So even though I tried to publish it, and I just sat down one Saturday and was like, I want to write a book that will sell, and that's when I met Nick Williams. Mm-hmm. Who came into my life and kind of took over. So that came out on June 1st, 2016. And then I realized, it didn't take very long to write that. I could write another one. And the second one came out around the beginning of July. And then I was like, I can do this every month. And that's what I started doing.
Yep. You powerhouse them. It's amazing. So in order to ask my next question, we first have to ask how Whit and Eddie are connected to Nick.
So Whit and Eddie live in the present. Nick and his husband Carter have passed away. They did in 2008. When we start meeting Nick and Carter, it's 1953. So Whit and Eddie, the very short version of the story is Nick and Carter, when they start getting older, they have a very large company that is worth a lot of money, and they realize they don't have anybody to pass it on to. So they, through a series of events, they end up coming up with a couple of heirs, Bob and Mario. And they train them for a few years, and then they pass away. And then Bob and Mario inherit, and it's so funny because of the timing of our conversation. Bob and Mario then meet Eddie, and then they set Eddie up with Whit, who is playing for the team that Mario owns, the football team, the San Antonio Matadors, which is fictional. And then we're a little bit into Whit and Eddie's story, and the DA of San Francisco County, who has just recently been recalled in an election, decides that he wants to prosecute Bob and Mario for the murder of Nick and Carter. And they were not killed, they committed suicide, which is actually well known, but he just decides it's going to be his flag that he's going to fly. And so they leave the country and hand the company over to Whit and Eddie. And that's how they suddenly become who they are. And that's about 4 books into the Whit and Eddie series.
Right. And the reason I wanted to get that groundwork laid is because you made a comment about accidentally making them the richest men in the world.
Yeah. So up until about book 8 or so.
Can you smite me with that?
Yeah, I'm smiting myself with it as we speak.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
But we got to about book 8 of the Whit and Eddie series, and a couple of people have been like, well, how wealthy are they? Or how wealthy were Nick and Carter? And I'm like, I don't know. So I decided, okay, it's time to look at Forbes and kind of figure this out. And so I've learned a lot about people who are very wealthy as a result of this. Uh-huh. One of the things is that Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk personally are, yes, they're the 2 richest men in the world, and they keep going back and forth. But their companies are worth a lot more because they only own parts of the companies that they own. But my thing had always been with Nick and Carter is that it was a wholly owned company, privately held, 2 shares. Nick had one, and Carter had one. Then Bob and Mario the same, and now Whit and Eddie. They each own 1 share of this company. So when I was valuing things, I was looking at the value of Amazon and the value of Tesla, and came up with some numbers to make it kind of comparable. Mm-hmm. But then when I realized, no, Whit and Eddie actually own all of it, unlike Bezos and Musk, that makes them richer than those guys. but because it's privately held, nobody really knows because they don't just
Right, there's
disclose
no
that sort of
reporting.
information.
Sure.
So when in the first book where there's the talk of them being on the Forbes list, also, by the way, did you know until this year when Melinda Gates is going to be on the Forbes list on her own, in my fictional universe, Nick and Carter are the only married couple ever on the list, and as are Bob and Mario, because there's never been a married couple. They're families, like the people who own L'Oreal and Veuve Clicquot and that big, huge, gigantic French company. But there are no married couples. They're never listed as being married. So the way I made it up is that Forbes would put them as tied at whatever place they would put them in, because they would be equal owners of whatever the number was.
Sure.
So anyway, then we discovered that because Nick and Carter bought a mining company in New Zealand in '81 for reasons, in order to solve a mystery, which is how Nick basically ends up with most of his money, is he buys something because he needs to buy it to do something, to solve a crime. So they buy this mining company, and then it turns out they have these platinum strikes all in Botswana and South Africa. And then it turns out, we discovered last year, that the thing that is more valuable than platinum is rhodium, which is in every catalytic converter, and which is why catalytic converters get stolen, is to get the rhodium out of it. And rhodium doesn't grow. Rhodium is found along the edges of platinum veins.
Okay.
And so in this Botswana mines that they own, they find more rhodium than exists anywhere else in the world. Which I was like, I'm already in for a penny. Might as well go in for
Right.
Going for a pound.
Exactly.
So now their estimate, it depends on and I didn't look up the value of rhodium today, but it's high. It's like 15,000 an ounce or something like that. And the next closest thing is like 2,000. So just to give you a comparison. But they're worth around something like 1.7 trillion at this point. Themselves. Bezos, Amazon is a $1 trillion company. Apple is a $1 trillion company, but Bezos is not worth $1 trillion. He's worth like 190 billion or 200 something billion, along with Musk. They're usually tied. So that's how it accidentally happened. I wasn't planning on doing this, and it was kind of ridiculous. And when I realized what I had done, I was like, I could either rewrite or just dive in, and I decided to dive in instead.
Nice. I love it.
Well, in addition to being the only married couple on the list, they'd also be the only non-assholes on the list. Because a lot of those people on that list are assholes.
Yes. And the other thing is, that's also been my premise, is that they have never done anything to earn this money. So they've never fought for it. They've never had to do anything because it was handed to Nick, and then it was handed to Bob and Mario, and then it was handed to Whit and Eddie. So they're more like dealing with the effect of just having it, not what it does to your personality when you're fighting for it, which is why those people are, that's my armchair psychologist analysis of why they're assholes. It's because they fought for that money.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So in continuing this trend of your characters being very tied to the modern world, they also have a Ukraine tie.
Yeah, so Whit was born in 1984 in Kiev, and his father was an athlete who was on the... I never can remember what sport he played, but anyway, he was a runner, and he was on the Olympic team in 80 and 84. And then because of what was happening in 80, the Russians, the Americans didn't go to the Soviet games. And in 84, the Soviets didn't go to the American games. So he decides that he wants to, when the Olympics are coming up, he decides he wants to join the Romanian team so that he can actually run, because the Americans did beat the Soviets in another set of games in like 83. And so he's like trying to figure out, like, are we really the best? Just because we won the gold doesn't mean we're the best, because we haven't run against the Americans. As a result of that, he gets sent off to a re-education camp for not showing enough fidelity to Marxist-Leninist themes. And then the KGB decides to further punish him by taking his very young child and shipping off to the US with a couple who have been lured into the Soviet Union as pretending to be, I'm like losing all my English language words, sorry. Pretending to be there for the purpose of missionaries. This is what I'm looking for. Anyway, long story short, Whit ends up growing up in East Texas as the adopted child of this couple. We later find out that his adoptive father probably knew there was some sort of scam going on with their job, their invitation to come into the Soviet Union, because although there were missionaries in the Soviet Union a few years later, after Glasnost started really taking shape, there wasn't an 84 and 85. Mm-hmm. So I built this whole backstory around that, including the fact that fictionally Putin was involved in all of that. And we find out eventually that Putin was probably involved in Whit himself being sent to the U.S. as punishment for his father.
Interesting.
So yeah, there's a big connection, and which I started writing about in 2019, not knowing how significant the connection would become.
Right, and so that's in Situation, which came out in April.
Right. So in Situation, it starts right before the invasion. Whit's birth father, Whit has met all his birth family, and his birth father is now the head of the mafia in Ukraine, or the mob, and basically disappears, and then suddenly is found murdered in Mariupol before the invasion. And it turns out it was probably the Ukrainian equivalent of the KGB or the FBI who did it, because they needed to take him out for reasons. Anyway, Whit and Eddie decide to, once things are beginning to heat up, they decide they can't stay in the U.S. That would just not, it would not be a good idea, that they need to be close to Ukraine, but they're not allowed to go into Ukraine for reasons. Mm-hmm. So they end up buying a castle on the border in Poland that looks directly over. Now, I moved the castle. The castle's actually in Ukraine, and I moved it over about 100 miles to put it inside Poland. Okay. But it's actually a really cool castle. And it would be a really cool place to live, actually, the more I looked at it.
Neat.
So they end up there, and then shenanigans ensue.
Woohoo. Whew. Okay, so deep breath before we move on. And I'm curious about this one. The Useful Uncle is Nick and Carter, right?
Yeah. So I'm writing 3 series simultaneously that are happening in 3 different time periods. Mm-hmm. There's Nick and Carter are now in the Adventures of Nick and Carter, which started off on January 1, 1970, and is very 70s. Then there's Whit and Eddie in the contemporary period, which when I start a Whit and Eddie book, I start on the date of the book is the date that I start writing. Okay. So the book I'm writing now starts on the 4th of July, which was on Monday. The previous Monday to today. And then there's a book set here in Daytona Beach where I live that's right now we're in 1948. And these are all happening simultaneously. I'm writing them hopping from one series to the next. And they're all in the same universe because Tom and Ronnie, who are here in Daytona, end up being in Nick and Carter books. And Ronnie is alive he dies in Situation, which is, I'm not giving anything away. He's 105, but he lives to be, to show up in Whit and Eddie's life. But yeah, The Useful Uncle is what just came out in the Nick and Carter series, and it is in the middle of what's early 71, and it basically is the middle book of a trilogy where I wanted to write a story about radical chic, which has always been something that has fascinated me, which doesn't mean a lot now to anybody, but in the early 70s was a big, huge topic. There was an article in the New York Magazine by Tom Wolfe about a party that Leonard Bernstein threw at his townhouse in the Upper East Side, and he invited some Black Panthers who were not impressed. By the way, they were like, whatever. But Tom Wolfe thought this was because Tom Wolfe could take anything and turn it around into something very sarcastic and sardonic. And he wrote this scathing article about it. So I basically put Nick and Carter in that situation where they're essentially the equivalent of Black Panthers, only they're better because they're white and they're billionaires. So it actually turns out to be this kind of weird thing where there's all these socialites in San Francisco who are not as wealthy. I mean, Nick and Carter are the second wealthiest people in the city after Gordon Getty. And they, as one person puts it, first he's like, well, they're treating you like they're pet fags. And Nick is like, yeah, I hate that word, but okay. And then eventually realize the same person realizes, no, that you're the pet billionaires. That's really what they're doing, because they want to, like, they're all trying to make deals with you when you go to all these parties. And that is what was going on. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it turns out there's something amiss is going on with a lot of these parties, and there's something else going on in the background. And The Useful Uncle is where that comes into light. And then the next book, the final book in this trilogy, which will be out on July 18th, called The Seductive Sellout, will be when that particular chicken comes home to roost.
And if I remember correctly, you've written a couple of our favorite celebrities into the series. Russell, Frank Sinatra, Princess Grace.
So this is Frank's old Blue Eyes first arrival in the Nick and Carter universe, but Rosalind Russell showed up back in 1954. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 54. And Princess Grace shows up in 57.
Okay.
And they solve a mystery for Princess Grace involving her gay uncle. And Rosalind Russell just is basically Rosalind Russell, who knows how to raise money, sees them as the perfect patsies for her little schemes. And she's also sweet and funny and hilarious. And they end up, in fact, although they're out of the country and not really supposed to be coming back in, they end up sneaking into the country so they can be there for the showing of Auntie Mame. I can't remember if it's the one right before or it's the Monday night. So it opened on a Wednesday, so it's the Monday night that they're there for.
Nice.
That they sneak in specifically so they can see it because they love her so much and whatnot. So in 71, we've got this little side story where Princess Grace has been asked by, it's the you guys are going to know who this is, and I can't remember the name of it. It's the Motion Picture Fund, but it's now called something different. It's what basically sponsors the Motion Picture Retirement Home, where all the stars go to retire. Right. Yes, it was a fundraiser for them, and they wanted her to be like the celebrity who comes in because she's not been back to Hollywood. Well, she's been back to Hollywood, but she hasn't been there officially since she'd left. Mm-hmm. But Prince Rainer isn't having it and this is a known thing. He was always very no, I don't want you ever going back there to do anything. And so, as just a fictional thing, I sent Nick's stepmother and father, who are also friends with, particularly the prince, to Monaco to go course her to do it. And she ends up doing it. And actually it dovetails with a letter that she wrote to Gregory Peck that I found online, where she says, oh yeah, it turns out I'm going to be able to come. And the date was just happened to be the right date for the story I was writing. So it's fun to kind of bring them back in kind of over on the side. And it turns out that Nick's father is going to become best friends with Frank Sinatra, which even I can't believe that, but I can't wait to find out what that's going to lead to, because I'm sure there will be some sort of murder in Palm Springs that has to be investigated.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he can solve the mystery of whether Ronan is actually his son or not.
Of all, there are certain topics that I really never want to touch, and that's one of them. I don't mind talking about things about people who are dead, but if someone is still alive, I'm like, because I never mention Roz's son. I mention him like he's off at camp or he's having a good day at school. I never have introduced him as an actual person in my books. I just don't want to. And I'm waiting for by the same token, I'm waiting to introduce Perry Mason, whose actor's name is that guy.
Raymond Burr.
Yes, Raymond Burr. Thank you very much. Because his partner's still alive, and I want to write about both of them, but I've never been able to get in touch with him, so I don't want to talk about him until he's passed away. And so that may be a while. Who knows?
Speaking of passed away, before we get on to your personal stuff, killing off characters hurts. Who'd you kill this time?
I've killed a lot of people in the last couple of books. So I killed Ronnie.
Yep.
I killed Whit's his adopted mother. Mainly because I was getting tired of writing about her, to be honest. And it just made sense that it was time. Whit needed to have
Okay,
a whole
girl,
bunch
let's
of,
go.
yeah, right, exactly. But Whit needed like a whole stack of tragedies on top of, because it is a setup for why he does what he does in the situation.
Okay.
Because he basically sneaks off to try to work to fight for the Ukrainians when he's not allowed to, and then he gets caught and sent back. But it kind of explains why he's like desperate to go do something, anything. So that was, and there was someone else in this book. I killed 3 people in that book, and then in The Useful Uncle, there's a whole slew of people who were killed, but they're secondary characters. Well, some of them are tertiary who just came in for the story. They're the murder victims, but then one of the murder victims is someone that I've written about, going back to like Rosalind Russell times, like to almost the very beginning of the Nick Carter series, which I don't want to give away who that is. But it's kind of sad, and there's going to be more payoff from that going forward, I'm pretty sure.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it hurt. It does. It, particularly with With's birth mother, who's kind of a combination of different women that I knew growing up, because she's from East Texas, and that's part of where I grew up. Every now and then I'm like, oh, like, I'm sorry. Like, it does hurt every now and then. It's kind of interesting.
All right. Anything else you want to mention about any of the series or books before I ask you about the Playhouse writing?
No, other than this. No. Yeah, I think we've. I can't ever just say yes or no to any of your questions. I have to give a long, detailed explanation. So I'm like, I could talk about this and this and this and this, because there's always so much to say, which is one of the things I love about.
But that's why people should buy the books, because
yes,
right.
because there's
there.
I was going to say,
you get sucked in, and it's never boring.
I was going to say, at the height of summer reading season, let's direct people to the books page on your website.
Excellent beach reads.
Yeah, they really are all that, because nothing is too intense. Everything is fun, and there's always a lot of dancing with the characters actually having real lives around all the other stuff that's going on, which is, to me, very important, because it's what actually happens in real life.
Exactly.
Right. Funny thing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of real life, you're writing a play?
Yes, I am writing a play set in the Daytona Beach series that takes place during a hurricane or a tropical storm that's blowing through here in September 48. And the play is basically a play within a play, where Tom and Ronnie go to the dress rehearsal along with their secretary, Marvine, whose mother and husband are in the play.
Okay.
And they go, so I volunteer for the Daytona Beach Playhouse, that is a real thing, and its predecessor, called the Little Theater, actually put on plays. They started in 47, and in 48 they're putting on plays over at something that doesn't exist anymore, which was an army, kind of army hospital that was for, it was a rehab hospital that was next to the county hospital. And the county hospital building actually has incorporated some of what the army had built. But they had a big, not a big, but a theater of sorts that was basically just a renovated Quonset hut. And the Little Theater put on plays there for a year or two before that was actually torn down by the army. And so what they're doing is putting on a play that someone local had written, and this is completely fake, and I'm not even sure the Little Theater would have done it. That's a futuristic version of Our Town set on Mars.
Cool.
And so it's kind of like Ray Bradbury-esque, and it actually it pulls from a lot of like what would have been sci-fi, pulp stuff in the time.
That's a rich field to play in.
Yeah, but no, it's just like it's Our Town, in America City, Mars, and in the middle of this, well, at the beginning, like within the first 10 minutes of this dress rehearsal, someone is killed. Well, the lights go out because there's a tropical storm coming through, and it's 1948. And then someone's murdered when the lights go out. And so then Tom and Ronnie have to solve the murder. They jump up on stage because they're sitting in the audience, And they jump up on stage and they're like, okay, we can help. But Marvine's boyfriend is a cop. So he's like, I need y'all to help me because they can't leave because it's raining. And so it's a closed room situation, which is a lot of fun.
That's very awesome.
I'm really, I don't know when I'm going to be able to do a reading of it, but hopefully by the end of the year. So
very
There
cool.
you go.
yeah, it's fun. And I'm going to give it to them so that they can use it as a fundraiser. And then just see if I actually am able to write a play.
Right. So what's this then about writing about movie and TV production?
Well, so in both Whit and Eddie and, well, to backdate, back in 1954, Nick bought, I'm sure you remember, Monumental Pictures.
I remember
They were
the
really
discussion.
big in the silent era, and then they never made it into the talkies. Now, I have, attention, Amazon lawyers, I have blatantly ripped off MGM because Monumental is the name of the studio in Singing in the Rain. So when they're making a talkie, so my proposition is that, yeah, they made talkies, but then they folded. And then they were sitting, and so Nick bought the property, and there's a Culver City studio right down, like a mile down the road from MGM. And then Nick turns that into, he builds a studio on Folsom Street in the city, and then he builds a back lot up in Sonoma, and then they're like, there's a lot of fog here. It's really hard to shoot locations out here. And so they build one in San Bernardino, and blah, 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 blah. And now in the present, there's now, because I added 5 miles to the width of Florida, there's now a studio in Volusia County, which is the county that Daytona Beach is in, called Monumental Daytona. So had like 2 books ago, Nick ended up executive producing and then basically being the showrunner, which was not a term used at the time, for a 13-episode syndicated series called A Touch of Rouge, which predates, it is a spinoff of another show they've done that's very popular Sundays at 10 p.m. Eastern Pacific called Metroforce, which I'm sure you remember. It was like, it's like fictional. It's like Hill Street Blues before they did Hill Street Blues. So it's like the different levels of the police force being talked about in different little side stories. Then A Touch of Rouge is a spinoff where the wife of one of the cops who's murdered, the wife then who has started her own like kitchen sink cosmetics company in a way that only could happen in 1970s television, suddenly is a millionaire who has her own company and is in a high-rise building in San Francisco. But because she's a black woman, the bank believes that she needs a minder who's a white man. And they end up falling in love. So when they realize that the story's going in the direction, Nick's like, we're going to syndicate this. CBS is going to buy this. Not if there's any hint whatsoever that she could possibly fall in love with this white guy. And so they syndicate it. It does very well. And there's a whole book about them filming the first episode where Rock Hudson is going to be the white guy originally. But then he gets freaked out that because Monumental, one of the things Monumental is famous for is everybody who works there is gay. And so he gets freaked out with the association of working for them.
Right.
And he quits, and it's a little bit of drama. But anyway, so Monumental, as you know, has over the years been kind of like the American International of movie studios. It's like made lots of beach movies and kind of weird horror movies and never really gotten any Oscars except for like photography. But now in the present time, Eddie is kind of getting interested in doing executive production, and there's now several things happening here in Daytona Beach. There was the filming of the remake of Rain called It Was Raining Then, and that's my Rochelle. If you remember that from Seinfeld, where they were always talking about this thing called Rochelle, and at first it was like a book, and then it was a movie, and then it was a play starring Bette Midler. And she eventually ends up singing the song, Rochelle. And it's like this, and I've always wanted to do that. So It Was Raining Then was kind of the Rochelle. We never knew what the story was about until in situation where it's revealed that it's actually a redo of Rain, which actually had been 3 different movies. Rain, Miss Sadie Thompson with Gloria Swanson, and then Sadie Thompson with Rita Hayworth. in stellar Technicolor. And so it's a redo, but this time, instead of it's Sadie Thompson, it's Sammy Thompson, who's a guy who's a gigolo who is on the run and is seducing a minister. That's all what this is about, is the prostitute seduces the minister. Written, by the way, by Somerset Maugham, which is its own little side story, because Somerset Maugham lived down the street from Nick and Carter when they were living in Nice and would never introduce himself to them. And we find out later it's because he didn't want to be associated with them.
Right.
And even though the Duke and Duchess of Windsor basically do this little Bastille Day party trip thing where they start off at Somerset Maugham's house and then walk down the street to go hang out with Nick and Carter, and crashing the party as they were wont to do, which is its own fun little side story. Anyway, in this retelling, Sammy seduces the minister, who is a black minister with an AME church in Washington, D.C. And by the way, AME were very smart, and there was no way they were going to send any missionaries to the Pacific, because they sent their missionaries to Liberia and to the West Coast, other countries on the West Coast of Africa, as well as South America and the Caribbean. They were no fools. They didn't send people across the Pacific like white churches do. But anyway, so it's this fun little retelling, and they end up actually having sex, which is actually seen because it's not 2000, it's 2022. It's always implied in the other stories, and it's implied in Somerset Maugham's short story, but it's not explicit. So there's a lot of writing about. I've had a lot of fun figuring out how to write about filming and what happens on sound stages. And one of the things I decided to do, just because it was fun, was in the filming of A Touch of Rouge, which that's the thing in 1970 where Nick takes over as the showrunner. He basically starts letting other crew members have opinions about what they're doing in a way that would have never happened. And I don't even think it would happen now, violating all the rules of like how things are hierarchically structured. And where there's like, there's a gaffer who's like, hey, why don't you have her say this? And it just kind of happened naturally. And then I realized that would never happen. I thought, yeah, but that could be a fun thing where people start talking about like, yeah, I remember I worked on that thing with Nick Williams, and we could like talk about what was going on, and nobody ever got in trouble and that sort of thing.
Nice.
So that's been a lot of fun. And I know I'm not doing it right at all because I don't really know anything about movie production or television production, but I have so much fun writing about it, particularly in the ways that I'm ignorant, because I know that the mistakes I'm making are actually fun little plot points.
Nice.
So,
well, and yay fiction.
Yay fiction.
Who knew?
All right. So what is up next for you? Any appearances? Are you just focusing on the next couple of releases?
Yeah, just writing. This month, I've already got one book out, The Useful Uncle. The next one is going to be, I think, the book I'm writing on right now, which is a Whit and Eddie that is tentatively called Philadelphia Freedom. Then will be the Seductive Sellout. Then I think I may do a short story, and then the next after that will be a Daytona Beach book, and that'll be in August. I've been very slow in producing in the last 4 months, and I don't know why. And I'm trying to like pick up the pace because I know I mentioned this the last time we talked. My goal is 3 books a month. And I may actually be able to pull off 4 for this month because the sellout is already pretty much written. But we'll see. And then it may be like then like in November, I'm like, well, I'm finally getting that book done, but I don't want to do that anymore because I just really love being in that world and spending time there. And the only way to do it is really just to write.
Right. Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, your website, frankwbutterfield.com, is the best place for people to spring off and meet you. Do you also stay active on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I was on TikTok, and then I got freaked out about the whole CCP thing. So I decided to get off TikTok. But then I discovered, because Instagram does TikTok-like things, and I don't know how much better it is with the whole Meta thing versus the CCP. I don't know which one is better or
You've gone
worse.
from the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah, exactly. But no, Facebook, if you want to interact with me, Facebook is the best place to do it. And I love that. I did, by the way, side note, I did have somebody literally walk up to me in my front yard yesterday. This is the first time this has ever happened, and say, "You're that guy who writes books, who does videos on Facebook." And I'm like, "Yes, I am." I'm like, "Hey," and he's like, "Well,
How
I know
random
you
is
because
that?
I know." Well, he said, "I've been watching your stuff, and reading and whatnot, because when you take photos," and I'm pointing to a place behind my camera, "when you take videos over there, I can see my friend's house across the street." And I'm like,
That's cool.
"Oh, that's really cool." That's the
That's
first time
also-
that has literally ever happened to me, where somebody walked up to me and like, "Hey, you're that guy." I'm like, "Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you."
Very,
See,
very
now you
nice.
need to make a T-shirt that says, "Yes, I'm that guy."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm that guy. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
If you're a writer, keep writing. If you're a reader, keep reading, and be sure to send in those cards and letters, because we writers love to get them. And please review.
Reviews.
Yeah,
Non-spoiler
and so-
reviews for you.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
non-spoilers.
No,
we don't want people spoiling your mysteries.
We need your readers to write non-spoiling reviews.
No, the reason why I'm gasping is because they actually just posted a review that was a spoiler.
Oops.
It's not it's spoiled more than I wanted anybody to know about.
Eesh.
Which is, it's okay for me. But
Yeah,
yes.
I know.
And you're tempted to press the star because Amazon will let you stop at the star, as will Goodreads. But please do go ahead and say, "I loved this book," or "The thing I loved about this book was this, that I finished it," or whatever it is you want to. But like, the reviews are equally important to the ratings.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But thank you for whatever you're doing. That's great. And tell your friends and your loved ones and your enemies, everybody.
Everybody. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Frank W. Butterfield for joining us. Frank, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yay. All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about these artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Please go like our YouTube channel, help us grow that thing. And if you want to hear a full interview, including the get to know you questions, check out our Patreon, because not all of these questions are going to make it to the YouTube channel. Dun, dun, dun. All right, everyone, we love you. Stay tuned for the review in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody. So we're back. And we're talking all things 1980. What are we on? 86?
I think they're 86.
I think it's 86. I think it's 86 is where we are in season 4. We're talking about Stranger Things. Cue the music.
Which one? They use all kinds of music.
No, but the opening sequence is still the same music over there.
That is true.
Yeah, so for those who haven't watched it, what rock are you under?
Now.
We're talking about Stranger Things, and it's an interesting I'm sure people are going, okay, I think I know what the queer angle is for this. And you'd be right. All the gays are just babbling on the socials. The kids are just really speculating about Will's sexuality. And they are also... What do you mean?
We'll get there.
Okay.
I that's not a point for me.
Okay. And they are also, thrilled that Robin is just the lesbian that we need in the 1980s. So, so there's those. So that's what the queer angle is. And we're going to look at the series as it stands now from season 1 to season 4.
Yep. So if you haven't ever watched it, takes place in the early 80s. The kids, the core kids are start off as a D&D group.
But they're actually played by kids.
Yeah, actually played by kids.
They're not 40-year-olds.
Who trip across a otherworldly incursion into our world from strange almost Cthulhu-esque, like kind of quasi-psychic based monsters that they quickly dub as old school D&D monsters, which is a riot. Then they meet the girl who is part of a hush-hush experiment, who is tied to the psychic disturbances, and saving the world ensues for 4 seasons. I will say the storylines tie together well, and the reveals of what's actually causing the disturbances and the history behind them are beautifully done. I'm not
Yeah,
always
the
in
aesthetic
love.
of the show is just
Oh,
phenomenal.
yeah, the art and direction and filming behind it are astounding. I am not always in love of storylines where it's kids save the world, because I'm like, really, again? Why are the adults so stupid? But to the writer's credit, many of the adults also step up and see the problem. It's not like only the kids can see it, and many of the adults also step in to fight.
And I will chime in here and say, I think the way the Duffer Brothers, who created the show, have done it is very realistic to how it was in the 80s. I mean, you have to remember in the 80s, there were, people were just really starting to, it was that whole Trumpism thing where it's all about me and my success and what I'm doing. And so it became that the parents weren't necessarily checked out. It's just they were so checked into what they were doing and accomplishing in their lives that I think it gives the kids the mobility. And I speak from living through that era and actually doing a lot of, I watched this show and it's like, that's me and my friends. We were the odd group of kids, we were in the drama club, we were in choir, we were those kids. And I see myself, I feel seen in that show so much. Right. And to be quite honest, my parents, though, they were heavily involved. I mean, my mom used to drive the getaway car when we would go TP a house. So trust me, she was involved. But sorry, Mom, let that one out of the bag. Actually, she's quite proud of that. She'd be very happy that I said that. I think that what they do really well, to your point, is that the kids operate in their space, and their space never becomes more than what kids would do. You know what I mean? They don't suddenly become adults in the situation.
Right.
They grow. I mean, the experiences they encounter make them grow exponentially, but it's believable in that these kids aren't suddenly brainiacs who solve everything.
Right. That's true. I mean, they do solve things with some very childlike, including with the walkie-talkies, some very childlike solutions.
Right. And that's what I think makes it's on the same level Goonies is. If you liked Goonies, you will like Stranger Things. Stranger Things is much darker. It deals with much more difficult situations and scenarios. It is also much bloodier. But it's that sci-fi horror Goonies mashup, and it just works.
It does. So to move on to the 2 characters of interest to our LGBTQ plus audience, Robin,
who we got from season 3,
who I love and I adore, and I realized why I loved her so much. Almost every other character, at least every other important character, has an internal darkness that they have to face, as well as the external darkness that is threatening the world. Robin doesn't. She does not have an internal darkness. She's fighting 2 external darknesses. The threat that's threatening the world, and the fact that she's terrified people are going to find out she's a lesbian, which was a very real fear in the 80s. But if you watch her character, she always tries. She's not graceful, but she always tries. And she's always there in the fight. She never gives up. And she's got an internal lightness because she's already faced her darkness. She's figured herself out, and she's present. She's just afraid of what the world's going to do to her.
Right.
I
think it's great that she
character.
And I think it's great that she has Steve in her back pocket.
Oh, yeah. She needs at least one good friend who knows.
Yeah.
And he's the right choice. He was absolutely the right choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when you watch the first season, Steve is kind of the thorn in everyone's side. He's kind of the asshole, bully kid.
He's
the
had a lot of growth.
Right. He's the guy with the fabulous hair from the 80s, and they kind of play that up and play it to the hilt.
Mm-hmm.
But what you find over time is how much heart he has.
Yep.
And he really has the biggest flip in the series, in that from where he starts and where he is now are just monumentally epic, as to where they've ended up. So,
right. The other character of interest to this conversation is Will. And I think I care less about the argument than most people. Will was pulled into the Dark Realm season 2, end of season 1 through season
1.
Yeah, end of season 1.
He's the very first episode. He disappears.
Yes, and it affects him, and it stunts his growth. It's pretty obvious through the rest of the seasons. He doesn't want to grow up. He doesn't want to stop playing D&D. He doesn't want his friends to grow up and do grown-up things. He wants to stay a young group of friends. And, I mean, psychology is a little unclear. Is it because he's afraid that growing up means the monsters are real? Is it just because he's stuck in time because of the experience? I don't know. But now, in this season, everybody's thinking that the looks he's giving his best friend Mike could be looks of amorous intent. And I'm like, you know what? The kid's got other stuff going on.
But I will push back on that. I do see and I recognize some of the things that Will is saying, and when he speaks about Mike and being the heart of the group and stuff,
I know where they're going
serious.
with that.
There is some serious love there, and he has, whether it's hero worship or whether it's, which hero worship is an element of homoeroticism.
Can
there
be.
is an element of that. I think Noah Schnapp's his perspective on it is actually kind of interesting, because he's saying he's not playing it gay in a obvious way. What he's trying to do is keep it ambiguous enough, because the character has so much going on. He kind of likes that he's in that weird gray space where you almost see it in his eyes that he doesn't know what's going to happen next, and he's just trying to hold on. And but I think it's a great metaphor for queer kids in that era who, like Robin's character, the character Robin, sorry, not Robin's character, the character Robin,
right.
Has a real fear of that discovery. And the fact that Mike is the one who confronts him and says, well, you don't like girls, and literally throws it in Will's face. And Will doesn't deny it. He doesn't push back. Which would be the obvious thing. Even if you were queer, you would push back on that in that era, because the label itself is what was terrifying.
Which is why I think he's not ready to grow up and face any of that.
I don't know that that's true. I don't know that I buy that. But, if that's what you see, fine. I see more.
Thanks
in
for
Will.
Dismissing me.
No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying I don't see it. I don't see what you're saying in that way. I think you can chew gum and walk at the same time. Obviously, I can't talk while doing both those things, but you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't think it's an either or situation. in my, so my perspective is that I think Will is queer. Where in the spectrum? I think that's still open to interpretation. But I do think he can walk and chew gum. So I'm not going to say this is so overwhelming, I can't figure that out. No, you can do 2 things at once. You can do 5 things at once. You can do 27 things at once. So I don't necessarily buy that argument, but I see your point. That's what I'm saying. I think it would be an interesting plot point if it becomes an unrequited love. Now, what I will say about the whole Will Buyer thing. One, I love that his brother is so supportive and says, I will be here for you no matter what. And I love that moment when the two of them talk next to the freezer unit they're going to put Elle in season 4.
Yeah.
Where they have a brotherly moment. And he says, I miss you. I miss talking to you. And his brother really sees Will and really kind of says, you know, I haven't lost sight of you. I'm still watching. I'm still here. And I think that was a very important moment for Will's character. And I think
because he wants to go back to the past. He wants to go back to the way things were.
Well, his brother would like that. And Will says, yeah, I'd like that too. It does give him some comfort, but I don't know that he's as arrested. I think he is arrested in some respects, and I think that could possibly be effects from the Mind Flayer and everything else, or Vecna, whatever we're calling it. And can I just say, Jamie Lindbauer, excellent job, but I remember him when they had him as King Arthur in Camelot, and oh my God, it was just I was like, really? You're going to cast him? So I have to say, this is the first thing I've seen him in that I really love him in this show. So kudos to him for finally finding a vehicle that I think really works for him, because that whole King Arthur thing really didn't work for me. Anyways, I digress. And just for him putting on that huge outfit, that skin, every time I see him, it takes me out of the show for just a split second, because I just go, God, that man is sweating under that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no way you can say he is not like neoprene to the hilt in that thing, you know? Just,
right.
If he doesn't come out with a rubber fetish by the end of this, I don't.
Or phobia.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be one or the other. That's all she wrote, you know, so yeah. But back to the queer characters. I think I like also that Robin's on-again, off-again love interest, they found some common ground. Yeah. It's not what Robin wants, but it's something. It's something for Robin to latch onto, and the fact that Steve sees it in action and lets her know, you know, good on you. I think that was a very important moment in this season.
Agreed. Ratings?
Yep. Let's do it. 5.
I have a couple that aren't 5, believe it or not. Production quality 5. Script screenplay 4. I do feel like it dragged. I wanted some aspects of the script to be tightened up a bit. And I know that some of the establishing shots didn't require words, and that's more of a directing thing. But I still, there are a couple of moments where I started looking around the room and I'm like, okay, that didn't hold my attention. Sound lighting score 5 across the board for that one. It was beautifully lit. It was dark when it needed to be dark. It was light when it needed to be light.
And the color
and
schemes
the music
of that.
Oh, and the color schemes were perfect.
They know how to work with that.
And then the music, they got real 80s music, and it was always appropriate. Art direction, costuming, mostly 5, but I will say that I'm not in love with Vecna's bodysuit. Because it's, like you said, every now and again you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that's a bodysuit.
Yeah,
it's a monster.
And it's not it's a cringy thing.
Yeah, it is definitely cringy. Casting 5. I have not yet met a casting decision in this show that made me stop and wonder if it was correct. They're all perfect. Directing, I will give it a 5 with the caution that I wanted a couple things to be. Yep. Queer themes presented is where I only gave it a 3 because it's not the thrust of the story, and that's okay. It was present, which is why I gave it a 3 as opposed to something lower. And I was glad to see it, but it wasn't the point of the story, and that's okay. I was just glad that we were represented. So personal overall becomes a 4.5.
And we are probably going to revisit this crew come the end of their next and final season. So, you know, we will have a revisit of their world and where they all end up. And a lot of people seem to be of the opinion that this next season will be Will-centric. So that would be very interesting to find out what they're going to do with that. So
really? I heard a rumor that it was going to be Mike-centric.
That's not where I'm seeing on YouTube. All of the speculators are talking it's Will. So, which kind of would be great because he was pretty much absent for most of season 1. So if they end up with him at being the focus in season 5, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like L, he's got the strongest of this group of kids. He's got the strongest connection to the darkness.
Right.
So
I just hope, and I'm praying, that if it is revealed that he is queer, that we don't do a bury your gays thing with him. Because that would piss me the fuck off. So, I'm telling you, Duffers, you're on notice.
So, what have you been watching this week?
I have been, well, there's a couple of things I've been watching. I've been watching a great couple on YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube,
Apparently.
YouTube. You know why? Because a lot of the stuff that's on regular TV just sucks. It just, unless it's made in Britain or one of the other foreign countries that actually are doing interesting series, of which I catch them on Netflix. I don't have time. I don't have time for stupid, situation comedies, because they're all formulaic. They all have laugh tracks, and I'm done with them. So, I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube documentaries. I watch a lot of YouTubes that are people that I think bring some lightness to the world and bring some levity. And the one that I've been watching is Jay and Amber. They're the Rob Squad group, and they actually are now starting to do movie reactions. And everybody's been on tenterhooks because they've done like Jaws and Goonies and Ghostbusters. So they've done it, and everybody was waiting for them to hit the Star Wars and the Indiana Jones franchises, and they finally did. And it's funny because they've gone to Disneyland or Disney World, and they've seen the Indiana Jones ride, and they've been to the Star Wars thing, but they didn't really know what it was about. And I keep thinking, how could you grow up in like the, and not have an exposure to that? But they didn't. And so now, having watched Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and watching the first Star Wars movie, and they're watching it chronologically in the way they were produced, which everybody advised them. It's kind of nice to see them finally go, oh, I get it now, and to see that light turn on. So it's it makes you revisit how you felt when those things came out. So I really like watching those, and they make me feel kind of happy. The other person I'm watching is the Humanist Report, and it's put out by Mike Figueredo. And he is a very left-leaning, liberal, queer man who is married to a wonderful guy. From everything he's talked about his husband a couple of occasions on the show. But what I like about it is that he's very focused, laser focused on people who claim to be left-leaning or leftists and progressives, but toe a corporate line. And I kind of like that there's someone out there combing through this stuff to kind of have those conversations. So if you've not checked out his YouTube channel, I keep hitting my mic. If you've not checked out his YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. It's called the Humanist Report. And he covered one thing that I thought with this latest round of the July 4th shootings, which don't get me started, but how there's a graphic, and I'll fly it here. And it just really kind of blew my mind. He put this up as a thumbnail, and it really grabbed my attention because in one photo, he shows why BLM exists and why it is such a major issue that we need to address. You have someone who did not kill anybody, was stopped for a traffic violation, and was shot 60 times. Actually, they fired 90, and he got hit 60 times and died. He killed no one, he injured no one in the whole process. And then you have a white kid who actually did kill 7 people, injured 47, and he was arrested without incident. If you need any more clarification on this issue and don't understand why people are so upset, that picture says it all. So Again, it's the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo. I highly recommend people take a look at his channel. He hits some very, very poignant topics, and I really enjoy some of the things he has to say. So just throwing it out there. That's what I am watching. You?
Not as much. A family member has some pending medical issues, so we've been trying to figure out future care for post-surgery. So aside from some doom scrolling because of the shootings, which happened just south of me, and his phone was found in my town, which means after the shootings, he came here.
Yeah.
So aside from some doom scrolling and some family stuff, I really haven't watched anything new.
Yeah, that would keep me off the tube.
Ay. However, I have been reading the news, and I do have a heartwarming Who Won My Week.
Oh, good.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, my week was won by the state of Hawaii. Oahu is trying to free itself from its coal plant and has introduced a huge battery, 158 of them, Tesla Energy Megapacks. And the Hawaiian Electric Company is switching to renewable solar battery packs to get rid of this coal plant and clean up their state. Hawaii as a whole is looking to accelerate its transition to 100% renewable energy, which is amazing. That's a commitment every state needs to make. And I know people are going to argue that, well, Hawaii's smaller, it's easier for them. Doesn't matter. We all need to make the commitment.
Well, that and the fact that people say, "Oh, it's smaller." Yeah, you know what?
That means
scalability.
They have fewer resources to make this
happen.
Well, yeah, and they have fewer resources to make this happen, and they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, it's just no. That's not an excuse.
Right.
I'm so over people making excuses for I mentioned this in one of our previous shows that the Balkans and the Scandinavian countries have really figured out how to run. I mean, people don't understand. Finland, let me explain something to the Americans out there. Finland has probably the most sorted out nuclear options available to them, in that if Russia ever launched an attack, they can protect their entire population. They have bunkers that are buried deep. Every building that has more than 100 people must have a bunker. It is law. And they must supply it with food for up to 6 months, with fresh produce swapped out every 2 weeks. They know what to do. They figured it out. And it's not something that the U.S. can't do. With our resources, we could do this like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's just
our mega millionaires would have to willingly accept a little bit of a pay cut.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? They can, in my opinion. What frustrates me the most is when I see countries like that. And then people often, and Bernie Sanders would say, look at Norway, look at Denmark, look at those societies. And they have really figured out how to support their people. Are there problems? Sure. There are problems everywhere. Mm-hmm. But in this scenario, they've figured out what they needed to do, and they just did it. Mm-hmm. Americans are too caught up in their bullshit to even get over their own apathy and their willingness to not be engaged and just sit and complain. I hear all these conversations about all these, Trumpists who are just so angry and they've got all these grievances and nobody's ever okay, have you lifted a finger to do something about it? Have you personally gone out and done something about it? No? Mm-hmm. Just sitting on your porch wanting to scream and wanting to go to these rallies? Yeah, I have no time for you. If you're not willing to engage and solve the problem and become part of the solution, then you really don't get a right to bitch. That's just how I see it. And especially when you see countries like the Scandinavian countries, like the Balkans,
states like Hawaii,
figured it out. Yeah, and Hawaii, but it's really sad that it's falling to the states to figure it out.
I know. Well, that's kind of how our country was built, though. Initially, state government meant more than national government. And I know that's fluctuated over the years, back and forth. But until a decision is made and solidified in terms of where the power lies, this fight's going to go on. Is it a state issue? Is it a federal issue? And the problem is it's not codified well.
No, and I think that the codification of it needs to be decided for the health of the entire union. But I also see that when people talk Civil War, what I see is secession.
Right.
That's what I see. And that really kind of makes me go, mm-mm.
So who won your week?
Who won my week? I'm going to say that my mom won the week for me. And I'm going to say that
another
because...
TP getaway?
Yeah. She would love if we went back to those things. Have I got stories? But yeah, my mom, you have to understand, my mom grew up in a very secluded kind of environment. She grew up where my grandparents, her parents, worked days, one worked nights. So she kind of, being the oldest daughter, she ran the house. So she really didn't have much of a childhood. So she lived vicariously through us and sometimes literally with us. So my mom got involved in those things. So, she got to have her childhood when she had her own children. And that's how she got, to have that part of her life. And so all of my friends think of her as a second mom, because she was involved in what they were doing, and she went along for the ride. But I want to say my mom won the week for me because she's been struggling with some short-term memory issues and some stuff like that. But things seem to be evening out. And I really like the fact that she's in a pretty good place right now. And I know that may not seem a big thing, but when you're the care provider and you're dealing with an aging parent, you take your wins when you can get them. And this week was definitely a good week. So I'm going to say she won the week. Go, Mom.
Yeah. All right, folks. Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.roguepodcast.com. Go to our website, follow the link to our YouTube channel, because right now the URL's a mess. But if you subscribe, and if you get some friends to subscribe, we can have a real URL, all of our very own on the YouTube, and then it's a nice and easy one for you to follow. So if you do enjoy what we're doing, and you like learning about new artists, please go subscribe. Like the alerts, or like and subscribe so you get the alerts for the new episodes, and tune in next week for your queer media fix. Bye for now.
Oh, what's there? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.